You think of a fork, you think of something you eat with as a utensil. Sometimes you may come to a crossroads where you have one road goes this way and one road goes that way. Those are called forks as well. In Bitcoin, there's forks. Of course, everything is on digital. It's all in the computers. It's nothing really visible that you can see, but there clearly are sharp turns in direction going from this direction to this direction, which is really what we call about Bitcoin hard forks out there, except there's more than just Bitcoin that use this, but we're going to talk mainly about the aspect of forks using Bitcoin, since that really is the precursor of all different cryptocurrency. Usually they're planned to add new features to the blockchain. So blockchain, basically you're developing, you solve this problem over here, you create a block, you add it to the blockchain and so on. And if you want to add some new features, some more digital upgrades to the blockchain, you have to sit down and create something different than what's already been there, because that whatever has been there is based upon the original code for the blockchain. It's all digital, it's all based on programming. And of course, we know for a fact that you have consensus all over the place to use blockchain, especially when it comes to Bitcoin in the mining operations. So you have miners involved, you have the consumers involved as well, and you have the blockchain with the original code. If you're going to change the code, okay, you have to sit down and create a fork or a different pathway. And often you have two different pathways. You have the original pathway going along, people still use it, because a lot of these forks come off the original code for Bitcoin. Bitcoin, still the blockchain, is still physically there, the original one, but you'll have branches coming off of it. And because there's a change of code, whenever that happens, we call that a fork. It's a new feature. So we're going to go look at some of the different forks here. We'll look at some of the new features. Bitcoin was released as an open source code and had a plan originally to be improved over time. So we'll talk about this later on. We'll talk about halving as well. Bitcoin was actually a genius process, and it took a lot of thinking behind it, especially in the designing. So Bitcoin's gone through a lot of different forks, each one created for a different version of cryptocurrency. It can really have an impact on the cryptocurrency. Whenever you have a fork, usually it's unstable. Almost all the time, though, more money is involved. People get all excited about, did you hear about the fork that's coming over here? Sometimes the community as a whole is divided about the necessity and the impact of the changes instigated by the fork. You'll get pushback. In Bitcoin's issue, it really is a proof of work environment. People solve problems, and that is proof of work. They work, they solve the problem, and they have this. So the people that actually are involved in the mining process, that is solving those mathematical equations, they do have input into the process, because we call that the entire community. And a lot of times they push back saying, we don't need that change, because people, number one, don't like change unless they're the ones instigating it. So anytime you have an opportunity for change, whether it's Bitcoin or just management or just general life, people resist change because they already know exactly what's expected of them for success. Also, now you have a fork, you will always get some type of pushback from an existing status quo that benefits or profits from the existing system. And all of a sudden, well, it's new, I don't want it. And people have a tendency to fight change because they're humans. So in addition, the cryptocurrency prices, every time you have a fork, people get so excited and the prices go up, they go down. What happens to the old prices? Will the old prices climb or go down? Will the new fork go up or down? And not all the forks are successful. So let's look at some of them. So what is a fork? It's a way that Bitcoin goes and blockchain introduces a new set of rules to follow for the Bitcoin. So you have that aspect of it. And by the way, I'm using Bitcoin here in a generic term, not by the specific brand. After the fork, the Bitcoin's blockchain diverges into two potential paths forward. A new rule is introduced. The users mining that particular Bitcoin chain can elect to follow this set of rules, or you can keep the same old one. You have a little bit of variation there, and it really helps you to sit down and pay attention to it. So the choice is somewhere in that fork in the road. The very first one happened in 2014. Keep in mind, Bitcoin really was the very first cryptocurrency out there. In 2009, the first economic transaction really took place in 2010. We're still doing the first notable Bitcoin fork in 2014. It's still relatively young. It really was based upon the aspect of trying to improve the overall blockchain. Bitcoin allowed 7 transactions per second. Now, keep in mind, Visa, 24,000. Okay, so this is super slow. And if Bitcoin is going to get any traction on a worldwide basis, this whole issue of the capacity of cryptocurrency to process massive amounts of transactions on a distributed computer system needs to really pick up. So Bitcoin XT aimed for 24 per second. They increased the block size from 1 megabyte. So actually the block size that builds up the cryptocurrency, the blockchain with it, okay, it went from 1 megabyte physically 800% increase in actually capacity. So each block would have an 800% more capacity and speed up the transactions to a much faster rate, making a much more easy to use commodity. So Bitcoin XT declined, but some members still wanted to increase that block size. Sometimes they don't work. So all of a sudden you have another group, not all of a sudden, 2 years later in 2016, Bitcoin Classic. Okay, in 2016. So unlike XT, it really wanted to increase that block size to 8 megabytes. It really wanted to go really much bigger. So really only 2 megabytes. So they shrank it down. They really scaled it down in the aspect of trying to make it even better. Then they launched another one called Bitcoin Unlimited in 2016. They released code, but didn't specify what type of fork it would require. So the miners get to decide up to the size of their blocks. You too could make the size. Well, the problem is you'll have some of them with giant blocks, medium-sized blocks, small blocks, depending on transition. It failed to gain acceptance. That whole aspect of uniformity in the blockchain really needs to be more adhered to, and that's what they discovered in this process up here. But you know what? They're experimenting in a new form of artwork to some extent, but it really is all in computer code in the aspect of trying to build a blockchain. They have one block that's up to 16 megabytes, one that's 8 megabytes, one that's 2 megabytes. You're going to have a real problem with symmetry in the block and the structure itself, plus also how it actually defines itself as an entire blockchain. What's that? It didn't get much acceptance. All of a sudden, you have the creation of the DAO. You kind of have to say it with this deep, booming voice in the process because it was going to be the next really fabulous thing. It was built as a smart contract on the Ethereum blockchain. Keep in mind, Ethereum is viewed by almost everybody as the second generation of cryptocurrency, and Ethereum just went through another change, and most of us really consider Ethereum to be the third generation of cryptocurrency because it used proof of stake instead of proof of work, but we'll talk about that at a later point. So with the whole aspect of the Ethereum blockchain, anyone can send Ether, which is what we call the coin for Ethereum, to a unique wallet on DAO, and they would get tokens on a scale of 1 to 100. So you get, for each coin out of Ethereum, you would get 100 DAO tokens. So they gathered about $150 million, making the biggest crowd fund ever in the total ETH, that's the initial we call it, Ethereum, from the DAO was worth over $250 million. That's a lot of money, and it's a huge launch to start something brand new. The platform allowed anybody with a project to pitch their idea to the community and receive funding from the DAO. You know, conceptually, this is brilliant. But a lot of different aspects of cryptocurrency, it is so untested, unproven. There's a lot of charlatans and crooks on it as well. But really, the DAO, people were actually trying to propose projects to sit there and advance the aspect of digital currency, trying to get funding. So the DAO tokens, they could vote, receive rewards if the project turns a profit. And things were really looking up until finally a hacker found a loophole in the coding that allowed him to drain funds from the DAO. The first few hours of attack, he stole 3.6 million ETH in the process. It equated to about $70 million at the time. You know, the attacker was able to ask the smart contract to give Ether back multiple times before the contract could update its balance. That's really the trick behind it. So all of a sudden, that famous thing we talked about earlier, the Byzantine generals rule could be surpassed because of the slow speed of the DAO. Can sit down and pause to wait for a transaction to be completed. So the attacker was brilliant as to what they were doing. And really, the hacker, for some reason, stopped draining the DAO, for whatever reason, maybe they got caught, maybe whatever, maybe they had a conscience, which is kind of a rare thing sometimes. Okay, but the Ethereum community, as soon as the pause there, they took control and they hard forked it over. Okay, and they stopped it right there, and accounts available to the original owners. And so the owners on the DAO, they can actually exchange the rate of 100 DAO tokens back to 1 ETH, which is what they originally paid for it. A lot of the damage was undone in that process. But also, we're going to talk later on about how the government goes through and controls different aspects of it. Sometimes, even though you may be clever and steal the Bitcoin or whatever it is, the problem is they can track you down to your wallet number. And if you sit down and you pay attention to that wallet number and you monitor on different sites, that's how the FBI and other organizations out there find the thieves. So who knows what will happen to that Ethereum that went awry. So Bitcoin spawned a whole number of forks. No one can say for sure. It's likely cryptocurrency will continue to experience both soft and hard forks into the future as well, continually growing the community while also make it increasingly complicated. The bottom line on Bitcoin overall, forks will continue. Usually it's going to be for a planned aspect of it, but every once in a while you get an unplanned thing that ends up being something good because everybody's in the learning process. So to summarize it, Bitcoin has set the standard for forks. So fork it over, I mean, something a little bit different now in the aspect of the blockchain, but other blockchains are split into forks as well. Sometimes planned, sometimes unplanned. Some survive and some don't. Know the jargon and nature. And by the way, Bitcoin is about actually making money. So on a hard fork, learn how to profit from it. Take care.